Welcome to the Philip Wiley Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Philip Wiley.
Hello, and welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Philip Wiley, and I'm excited to have Freakyclown joining me today. I've kind of known of Freakyclown for a while and from social media, but we never have interacted. I saw he had a new book come out, and so I thought, yeah, this would be a great guest to have on the podcast. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I mean, how many this month someone called me Freakyclown by accident.
I'm sorry, I meant Freakyclown.
It's just stuck. It's stuck. Like even my mother has called me it now. It's just like, oh god, I can't get away from Freakyclown. That's like an alias I sort of had when I was like sort of 15, 16. And that's the one that became famous out of all the little hacker handles I was using. And it was like, I wish I could go back and change it, right? And just never use it because it's just embarrassing. Yeah. But now Freakyclown has got on. It's like, oh my God, I can't even get away from that now. So it's one of those things I wish I could de-invent.
Yeah, what kind of messed me up there is earlier I've got one of the people to help me run my DEF CON group, local DEF CON group in Denton, Texas. We were joking with him because his name is Rick Medina and his handle is Funky Cold. So earlier we kind of messed around about his name because recently I was listening to that song by Michael Jackson, Beat It. And there's that one line that says, show them how funky. And so I thought, yeah, I said, you should start a training series called Show Them How Funky. And so I created like a gift from it and even just like a small video clip, and we were joking around that. And his handle's Funky Cold, so that kind of got me mixed up with your name.
Well, thank you very much for having me along.
Whatever
my name is. My real name's FC, by the way. There we go.
Okay,
that's an easier one.
Okay,
people will still mess that up. I don't know quite how. Honestly, get all sorts. Like when you're at border patrol and like they're checking your passport and they're like, FC, is that really on? It's like, it's in my passport, man. Like I'm not faking that, am I? So yeah, and yet people still ask me how to spell it. So
yeah, that's funny. So for our listeners, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your background.
Yeah, sure. So my name is FC. I've been a ethical hacker and professional cyber criminalist, sort of wannabe, since I was a kid, really. So I've been doing this for basically 3 decades. And what we do is, we legally break into places on a contract and then tell people how we did that in order to help them figure out how to fix things. So currently I am the co-founder of a company called Cygenta, and my wife is the other co-founder, and we have just moved to Las Vegas in America, away from England.
Oh, very cool. So it'd be close to summer camp if you
yes, exactly.
Plan to go.
It's like 10 minutes down the road. I can get involved with everything. I don't have to worry about sort of flights or anything. It's like or booking a hotel. It's like literally just go home. It's fine.
Not that that's the only important thing, but that sure saves your expenses to fly.
It really does.
UK, get a hotel and all that.
Yeah.
So very cool. So the type of stuff you do, I would assume, is not your run of the mill cookie cutter pen test that people are kind of familiar with these days.
Yeah, I mean, we actually actively turn down clients that come to us and say we want like a tick the box type pen test. We won't do that. We actually actively tell them, bugger off, go and find someone else that'll do that, because we're not interested in that. We're interested in actually changing behaviors and sort of the security of companies. So if you're into that, then great, give us a call and we'll do like a proper pen test. But my speciality that you're probably more familiar with is I cross over between that cyber piece and the physical piece. And my wife carries over onto the human side, so she does all the awareness, behavior, and culture stuff. So I do the breaking in stuff. She tells you how you should help people understand that culture to help prevent that.
Very cool. So yeah, I think a lot of people, seeing the way some of the pen tests are done, even taking the physical part out of it, just some of the typical compliance pen testing. I think that's a lot of reason people move out of it or move into management or other areas, because you can only validate SSL and TLS vulnerabilities for so long before you go mad.
Yeah. And so many people just like think it's running an automated test, like sort of running some tools. It's not. It's like I have this argument all the time, right? Like, so people be like, "Oh, do you think AI is going to take over pen testing?" And I'm like, do you know what pen testing is, first of all? Because if you knew what a real pen test was, you knew it's not taking over, right? Because there is no actually a great way to explain this, right, to sort of someone new to this industry. If you've tried Hack the Box or anything like that, right? So if you go onto one of those and just run some automated tools, see how far you get, you're not going to get anywhere, right? You're not going to be able to do those things that pen testing actually does, which is the manual part of it and figuring out the puzzle of how to get around some security. Automated tools will grab the low-hanging fruit, but they literally will never replace an actual proper pen test. So it's always an interesting argument to have with people.
Yeah, one of the things I guess I had to consider too is if it's got a CVE based on whatever it finds, if it's able to automate exploiting it, so you're only going to be able to exploit CVEs, how are you going to find 0 days?
Exactly. I mean, we do. I mean, God, how many 0 days do we have? Like sort of things that would turn into a CVE? I would say probably 1 or 2 a month we discover manually doing things. They don't all get turned into CVEs because, NDAs and stuff, we have to sort of keep secret on some things. But yeah, there's a lot of manual work that can be put in that takes your hacking to another level.
You're very cool. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The questions you always get about AI replacing, especially with the popularity of ChatGPT, everyone's even asking more, is it going to replace? And I don't know, sometimes I tell people I think it'd be easier to replace management with AI than it would be pen testers.
Yes, absolutely. Interestingly, actually, there was a interesting discussion I had this morning. So my wife and I went out for breakfast this morning. We went to a local Denny's, and they had one of those robotic servers. So like this little robot that came out with our breakfast and handed it to us on a tray and stuff. And we got chatting with some of the staff there, and they hate it. They absolutely hate it. And we were like, well, are you scared that it's going to take over your jobs? And they're like, no, it's driving customers away. Like, they come in and people are literally scared of this robot. And there's some people that literally just walked out, and there's some people that ate really quickly and then left and have never come back. It's absolutely fascinating. It's like, it's just delivering food, yet people are so terrified of it, they won't even go and eat there. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. It just makes you wonder how long people adapt to that. Some of the younger folks.
Yeah. Oh, the kids love it, apparently. They absolutely rave over this. They'll go up to it, try and take photos with it and stuff. Adults, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes there's ways, things you can automate, just like going into a McDonald's or something. It's kind of nice to be able to skip a line, use the app or use the kiosk and not have to wait in line to get the order. Plus, sometimes there's, when there's human error and everything, but your order can be messed up. But if you can enter it on your own, then sometimes it can be quicker. But
it also means you don't have to talk to people and interact with them much nicer.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes people are having a bad day, and it's just better to deal with the kiosk.
Yep, exactly.
So very cool. So the type of pen testing you do, is it mainly like adversary emulation type of stuff?
It's essentially that. We don't really get involved in any of the defense side. I couldn't make or defend anything if I tried. My brain is very much focused on breaking things, always has been. It is all adversary based. We try to simulate everyone from the script kiddie hacker through to the insider threat through to the the nation state level. I was before starting Cygenta, I was the head of offensive cyber research for Raytheon, massive defense firm.
Oh, wow.
We did some amazing stuff and amazing work there. So I can cover that range very well, from APT all the way through to script kiddie.
Yeah. So as far as, we kind of mentioned AI, is there any kind of automation that you like to use to do any part of what you do? Because I know sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the key thing. I actually did a YouTube video on this a while ago, about what you should automate and why you probably shouldn't be automating. You can only automate the things that you do regularly enough and that you know what is going to come back from those tools. So don't go away and just automate everything and hope that you'll get, amazing elite hacker skills, because you won't. You have to understand every single bit, every foundation, every command that's happening. And then you have to understand what it's going to return, because if you build this chain of tools that feed into each other and one of them messes up, you're going to have wasted hours on a pen test because you thought those tools were pulling in data and pulling out data that it needs, when actually something's gone horribly wrong because something's responded in a way that you didn't even realize. So that's my key to automation, is finding the things that I do repetitively that are consistent, that I can just chuck some tools out. Maybe I write some custom tools, maybe I write some custom scripts to do that, but only after I know all of the specific steps that it's going to take.
So as far as the type of scripting you do, what language you like use for your scripting?
I mostly use Python and Bash, to be honest. There's a lot of one-liners in my tool bag. I try and release things if I can onto my GitHub, but a lot of it is proprietary stuff for one particular client, so it doesn't really sort of get seen that much.
Very cool, because it's one of the things that the question I always get when people are wanting to get into pen testing: do I need to know how to code? Do I need to know how to script?
No, you really don't. You can pick it up. Like, I'm not a Python developer. I can't write. Like, if you gave me a blank screen and said, write this thing, I wouldn't be able to do it, right? I can hack code together. I can take other people's tools. I can take other bits of code that I've written and kind of make it do the things that I need it to do for that one particular time. It won't have any error checking. It won't, like, if it fails, it's just going to crash. Like, I don't have time for that. I have to build a tool to perform a function as quickly as possible, because I'm on the client's clock, right? They're paying me for my time. I need to do things quickly. So it's dirty and horrible and it doesn't work all that well. It just does that one specific task. But recently I rewrote a tool in Go. I've been messing around with that. So inspired by Tom Nom Nom, good friend of mine, Tom.
Okay.
He released a tool in Go. I thought, do you know what? I'll give it a go. So I actually used ChatGPT to help me rearrange some of the code and got it working, and that's been released now. So that's my first Go project.
Very cool. So I've heard some good things about Go. That's why I was kind of curious what scripting language you're using.
Yeah, so it is literally just Bash, Python, and now a little bit of Go as well.
Very cool. It's pretty interesting how things have evolved, because remember back in the day when everyone was using Perl for stuff.
Jeez. Perl. I mean, I've got like a nice little CVE that from many years ago that I got with a great chap called Tim. He is phenomenal at Perl, like literally just a guru of Perl. And I remember we found this vulnerability in I think it's some Cisco kit, and I was bashing my head against the wall for ages, and he just wrote this piece of Perl from a blank page that just did it all. And it was like, my God, man, you're just a genius. So I can't read or write Perl. It is just beyond me.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how that's, because I remember how so much stuff was in Perl back in the day, a lot of libraries and different things. At least it's good that Python's come along and kind of replace that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be a lot further back if we had stuck with Perl, I think. A lot more. I mean, even some of the more esoteric languages are a little bit they're easier to understand than Perl, for example, in like Brainfuck or Swimfish or something like that. They're all, you can kind of understand what's happening with them. Perl, I have no idea.
Yeah. So if someone's wanting to learn how to script, how do you advise? Do you advise going through a course, or just kind of trial and error?
If you've never done any programming whatsoever, then take a course, right? I mean, there's many free courses on YouTube, for example, of how to get started, right? And there are some great books like Learn Python the Hard Way, fantastic book as well. You can do that if that's your style, or you can start just grabbing some Perl scripts. Jesus, get it on my brain now. Don't grab Perl scripts, grab Python scripts and start hacking them together to see what you can make them do, and then you'll start to understand a little bit of what is going on the underside of it, and then hopefully you can make it do something you want to do. And start off simple. Don't try and build the latest, greatest, best tool. Just get it doing something simple, and then grow from that.
Very cool. So just, since you've been in the industry so long, I'm sure you've seen a lot of change, but so what are your opinions on like hacking nowadays compared to back, when you were getting started out?
So yeah, I mean, over 30 odd years, you see a lot of changes. There's a lot of things change and a lot of things don't. Like we still have a lot of the same problems. If you look at like the OWASP top 10, the issues haven't really changed. The mechanisms of delivering those issues maybe have, but we're still seeing the same things year and year and after. So yeah, things haven't really changed that much, but they've also changed quite dramatically. So back when I started, this is going to age me very well, but I remember when the World Wide Web came out, right? So I remember seeing like the first demos of HTML and clicking a hyperlink, we used to call them. You click the hyperlink and it took you to another page, and it was mind-blowing back then. Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that nowadays. But yeah, when I was a kid, like hacking was... it was completely off the radar. It was really underground. It wasn't, there were some things we were doing that weren't even technically illegal because there were no laws around it, right? So it was exploration at its finest, at the rawest level. You had to understand the absolute foundations of how computers worked, because there was no YouTube, there was no Google, there was nothing to look things up. It was just looking at a thing. You might have found a manual if you're really lucky. A lot of computers then came with like huge thick manuals on how to write your programs, because all you got was like a little C prompt, and that was it. That's all you got, which is a prompt. And it's like, I'm not going to do anything until you tell me something to do. So you used to get magazines that had like programs written in them. Like there'd be like 50 pages in this magazine that you'd have to type in by hand, because there's no other way to sort of get it from the magazine into your computer. So you'd spend an hour or two programming it in and then run it, and it would probably break, and you'd have to debug it for another 2 days. And then you turn off the computer, and then it's lost. If you wanted it again, you had to write it in again. But hacking back then was it was really niche. It was very underground. There were billboard forums. So basically you would, before the World Wide Web, you would dial up a modem to connect to another computer. And then someone discovered that actually, if you put 5 or 6 telephone lines into a computer, you can get 5 or 6 people connecting to that computer and all chatting on like a bulletin board. So that was really where I started. So yeah, I'd say the biggest change I've seen is the transfer of knowledge is much easier now.
And it seems like now too, back years ago, there weren't as many tools, but things have gotten more technical, the technologies that you're testing, but then the tools have gotten so much better. Yeah. I don't know. I think it seems like a lower barrier nowadays as far as when you consider some of the tools.
Oh yeah. It's the barrier to entry now is much, much lower. It's almost like ground level. Like you don't even have to have any skills. You download Kali Linux, you run a couple of tools. They're all GUI interfaces. You don't even have to use the command line. And it's kind of like, there it is. It's on a plate. You don't have to think about it. Whereas, back in the day, it was, you'd have to code your own tools. You'd have to figure out the exploits yourself. So yeah, the barrier to entry was much harder back then, but also the threat landscape was much smaller. Like the explosion of the internet really did mean everyone was vulnerable really quickly. So yeah, the scale of things has massively changed as well.
So if someone was wanting to get started in offensive security, what would you recommend for them to learn the trade?
Oh gosh, what would I recommend? I would suggest trying to find some of the the hack the box challenges. I've forgotten some of the other ones because I don't really use them, so I can't think of any of their names right now. Pen Tester Labs, that's also very good. Burp Suite have a great academy online that's for free. So start with those sort of teaching websites. There are paid ones, but you don't have to do that straight away. You can get into that a bit later. Also look at, capture the flag games. These are like free to play generally anyway. You sign up and you start hacking onto boxes. There's little challenges that you get that are worth different points. They're always great fun. You can grab a couple of mates that are interested in it, create a little team, and then go away and sort of do it over the weekend. There's some big ones that take place, and there's some basically every week. I mean, if you go to I can't remember the name, CTF flag, I think maybe, they have a list of upcoming CTFs that are running. So CTFs and training academies, probably the best place to start. And then you could maybe start looking at bug bounty programs. But I think that's probably the next step to look at once you've got some skills under your belt.
Yeah, I think some people underestimate CTF sometimes, because I've heard some people on the internet complain about the OSCPs and it's CTF-like, but sometimes the things are CTF-like. It's more difficult than what the real world is, and it's going to make you better.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge gap between CTFs, bug bounties, and pen testing. I actually did a video about that on my YouTube channel as well, where there are different skills required, because in a CTF, you know that there's a vulnerability, right? You know that there has to be a vulnerability, otherwise there wouldn't be a flag hidden, and so you couldn't get the points, right? So you have that pre-knowledge that there's something there, and it's kind of like a movie, right? You don't put anything in a movie that isn't helpful to the movie, or in a computer game, you don't waste loads of resources putting loads of stuff in that doesn't help the game along. It's the same with the CTF. There is a CTF there, and if it's running a PHP server, well, there's probably a vulnerability in the PHP server, right? It's not real world like a pen test, which is, here is all of our stuff. Tell me where I'm bad, right? And you have to find things, and they may not be things. So you can spend a lot of time looking for the things that aren't there. So yeah, it's a vast scope of differences between those two ends.
Very interesting. So yeah, before we started the show, you mentioned about the story about your first time at Info Security Europe.
Yes. So we were discussing about the move, and you said you were going to London for InfoSec, and loads of people have been asking us, like, are you coming back for InfoSec? And it's like, dude, we just moved to America. We're not coming back for InfoSec. And I've kind of done it for many years. I've been really involved with it. We've presented there, both of us, several times, me and my wife. And I mentioned that my first time at InfoSec was very different to most people's. So at the time, gosh, I can't even remember how old I was, but I was part of the London 2600 hacker group. And we talked our way in, we socially engineered our way into InfoSec. And as we were walking around, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. We got into the sort of the show area, and we found this little gap where they hadn't quite placed the booths correctly, and there was a gap. It was probably about this big. It was about just under a foot, I'd say. Well, I don't know what that is for Americans. 12 inches. What's that? 32 centimeters. No, that doesn't help you either. What do you use over here? Oh my God.
Inches and feet. So that looks like,
yeah, right. So it's about 12 inches, right? So we had this space, and we thought, oh, we'll make a booth. So we got a sign. We got like some pieces of paper, and we wrote London 2600, and we sort of built our own little booth in between these things. So that was an interesting first experience of InfoSec for me.
Yeah, it's definitely using the hacker mindset.
It was cool. It was free. We got in for free.
So what are some other interesting hacks that you've done before that you can share?
Oh gosh. Well, there's a lot in physical hacks that I've done that are now in my book that's just been released. Literally yesterday was the publishing date. But as for hacking stories that have been interesting, once caught a switch on fire. That was interesting. We were called into this one client, and they hadn't been tested. It was an old council that, just the kit was so old and everything was super dusty. And we plugged in our kit, and we were bashing through the network, and the poor switch got too hot, and because of all the dust built into it, it caught fire. So we were like, "Oh, this isn't fun." So yeah, often pen testers will get blamed for everything. Like if you're on site or anywhere close to being to the site, and something goes wrong, you will get blamed for it. That's my one thing. If you're trying to get into this industry, you're going to get blamed for a lot of stuff. So make sure you log everything. Make sure you tell people where you are, because oh man, I remember once being at a massive media company. I'm not going to say which one. It's global, and we were in there. Literally, we just sat down at our desks, and all hell broke loose because someone had completely wiped the whole database. They'd lost absolutely tons of video footage, and they were like, "Well, it's the pen testers. They've just arrived." And we're like, "You see our laptops? They're still in our bags. Like we haven't even plugged into your networks yet." And they're like, "Yeah, but you're all hackers. Like you've definitely done something to the Wi-Fi network." And we're like, "Why would that's not even in scope? Why would we be doing this?" And so someone sheepishly came along and was like, "I think I might have had something to do with that." He'd written a script. It was probably in Perl, to be honest, and he had deleted it. And so we were all like, "Okay, well, you've got backups, right? Like our contract says that we won't come in and pen test you unless you confirm that you've got backups, right? Because if something does happen, very unlikely to happen, we want you to have backups so that you don't blame us." And they had this little meeting for a while, and they're like, "Have we ever tested our backups?" And it turned out they hadn't, and it didn't work. And so we were like, "Well, there's nothing here for us to test now because you've deleted all your data. So guess we won't unpack, and we'll just go home."
That's funny. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I guess that week they'd blamed DNS and firewalls too much that they had to blame the pen testers.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you get blamed for everything, no matter how ridiculous it is. But sometimes it is our fault. I remember taking Brazil offline for a bank. But that happens. But that was on them, really. I was testing their network, and they had a globally flat network, and Brazil was connected via an ADSL line between the UK and Brazil. So it wasn't particularly huge. We didn't know that. They didn't tell us. And so when we scanned their subnet, it just completely saturated the pipe and it went off. So yeah, that was a fun day.
Yeah, I've got a story where once I was testing this company and I was using Masscan, and there was a ton of IPs to test for PCI pin test. And so I kind of ran it a little bit too fast and rebooted a couple firewalls.
Yeah. Some of the things they never teach you in any of these like courses is stuff like, don't scan printers. Never scan a printer. Yeah, that's going to be just a bad thing for everyone, and you're going to waste a lot of paper.
I think as far as myself, I've caused more outages from my sysadmin career than I did my pen testing career. Because there was one time I was building a server. It was rack mounted servers, and I was installing the software and getting ready to turn it off to reboot, and I turned off the wrong server.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, I had a small career doing sysadmin, and I remember doing silly things. And even now I'll do silly things like when you SSH into a machine and then you reboot it and you're like, "Oh crap, I've just changed all the firewall settings on that. I'm never getting back in now." Just the momentary lapses of concentration that cause you to go on a 5-hour drive to fix something. Yeah, it's just it's ridiculous.
So what we should get into your book, if you wouldn't mind sharing about your new book and kind of tell us what it's all about.
Let me just grab a copy.
Sure.
Yeah. I generally have it on my desk, but I'm actually at my wife's desk today.
Okay.
Censored. Let's see if I can get it.
There you go.
It's not de-blurring it.
Yeah, it's your blur.
Oh, there we go. There it
goes.
So my new book, How I Rob Banks, is a collection of anecdotes over my many decades of career breaking into places like banks or government buildings and such places. So it's just funny stories. If you want to get into physical pen testing, this is some of the stuff that you'll probably end up seeing at some point. And there's a couple of chapters in there like teaching you things like how to break into safes, how to lockpick, how to bypass doors, etc., and some other tips and tricks in there.
Very cool, because there's not a lot of I don't know, I can't think of books right offhand, but I know there's some YouTube things, but I don't know of any books that share any kind of physical.
There's on the chapter on lockpicking, I had to cut it down. So there's an additional bit where I mention about bump keys and comb picks. And so I've just recently did a video on my channel where I describe them, and not only describe them, but actually show you them in action. So there's some additional material that never made it into here.
Well, interesting. You have to have like a little companion ebook or something.
There's a lot of stories that just can never make it in there because they're against classified sites. But some of those were just, if I was able to tell you about them, most people wouldn't believe that they'd happened. But some of the interesting things like in here is the time I got asked to steal a helicopter. Which is a fun story. There's my first ever kidnapping, not my kidnapping, the one that I kidnapped someone. There's some great stories in there, and I've enjoyed writing it. So
got to check that out for sure. Sounds very interesting. Do you have any stories like Jason Street where you accidentally robbed the wrong bank?
So no, because I've been pretty good and pretty sort of hot on making sure that I know precisely where it is. But there is one story. It's actually in the book, but I'll try and retell it a little bit quicker. It was against a site where I couldn't get down to do the reconnaissance stage of it. And so I knew that one of our sales staff were going in to that building. So I was like, dude, when you're in there, can you just grab the badge that you've got, go into a toilet, take a photograph of it and send it to me, right? And he's like, of the toilet? I'm like, no, the badge, dude. So anyway, so he takes a photo of the badge and he sends it to me. And then a couple of weeks go by, our job gets scheduled and it's like a month out, right? So we're like, okay, whatever. I just kind of forget about it for a while. So a couple of months pass and I get to go in there, right? So I turn up at site and I've got my fake badge that I've made. Now I'm wearing it on my left side, right? Because as you go in, there's a set of the glass barriers, right, that you have with a sort of tag thing. And at the very right hand side, there's a sort of a guest one, right? And beside that is a security guard. So I'm wearing my badge on my left, my fake badge, so that he can't see it very clearly, right? So I walk up to the guest access and I'm like, it's kind of like showing my badge as quickly as possible, so that he'll let me in. He's like, whoa, dude, I need to see the badge a bit better. So I'm all right. So I take it off and show it to him, thinking, hope my forgery is good enough. And he's like, I can't let you in with this badge. It's wrong. And I'm like, what are you on about? I've been working here for weeks. You've been letting me in. And he's like, not with that badge, man. It's completely out of date. And that's when a realization strikes, right? I'd walked into this place and it felt slightly odd. What they had done in that previous month and a bit was completely rebrand. All of the logos, all of the colors, everything had changed. So this badge I had, completely out of date, didn't look the same, didn't have the same logos or anything. So inside, my brain just explodes and I just start internally panicking. And I'm just stood there dead face looking at him like, shit, what do I do? Right? So I'm like, well, I need a new badge then. And he's like, yes, you need to get a new badge before you can come in here. And I'm like, okay. So I grab the badge and I slam it down on the desk of the receptionist that's nearby, right? So I make a really loud noise with it. That's known as an interrupt, right? And you can use that for your advantage, right? And this is what I did, right? So I slapped the badge down and I pointed to the security guard and said, he told me you need to give me a new badge. And she was so freaked out by this, and she'd seen that he had done this, that she just wrote me a new badge. She printed me a new badge with my name on and handed it to me. And so I was like, okay, cool, thanks. So I snatch it back. I walk over to the security guard. So I show it to him. I'm like, see, I've got a new badge. She didn't even bother checking that I was supposed to be there. She just took my badge, what was there, as read, and just made me a new one. So I showed the security guard, and he's like, no, mate. He's like, yeah, you can use the barriers with that one. So she'd not only given me a real badge, she'd given me an upgraded one with the actual RFID in that worked, and so it got me into the company. So it's like, so it worked like so much better than I thought it would. But yeah, I just ran off to the toilets and just like calmed down a little bit. Just couldn't believe I held it together for that. So that was a fun one.
Yeah, I bet that was a stressful moment. Once you got through, it was probably one heck of a rush.
Yeah, it's always the way. Like I do these jobs, I get through it, and at the wash-up meeting, I'm generally drenched in sweat because everything's happened, right? And all the adrenaline hits afterwards, and you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe like I climbed down a bloody lift shaft, or I sort of went out of a window onto a roof, or just some of the crazy things you do on these things, right? And so I'm sitting in wash-up meetings, like head in my hands, like absolutely knackered, absolutely like sort of just wringing a sweat, and you can tell people in there are like, this guy looks an absolute mess. How did anyone not spot this guy like walking through the building? And just like, I didn't look like this 20 minutes ago, I promise you. It's just like that's all of the rush of the job coming through.
Very cool. So we're getting down towards the end of the show. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close out the episode?
I don't think so. Apart from, if you're in America and you want a decent pen test, then come and have a chat with us.
Sure. And we'll be sharing your social media, book, and YouTube channel in the show notes, or anything else you'd like to share in there. So
yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for having me along. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for joining, and welcome to the US.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to The Philip Wiley Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Philip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Philip Wiley. Until next time.